low-level JavaScript is no more. Well, at least it's changing a little bit. And it's changing in name, and it's changing in concept. Just a little. And this video is really just to kind of walk you through why it's changing, and what it's changing to, and why you don't need to worry if you were a big fan before and now feel like you're, somehow being betrayed. So I'll start off with why. I actually started this channel around 3 years ago now, I think, maybe longer. And the intention from the very beginning was to basically create interesting, low-level, deep content, but aim that at an audience who are, at the very least, kind of intermediate. There are so many beginner tutorials out there. There are so many, here's my first React, here is the basics of Java. And that isn't what I wanted to do at all. I don't find that interesting. I think a lot of people don't, but that's kind of the saturation point that you see. And so I wanted to do something a bit more advanced. And I wanted to do something that was advanced, but also targeted at groups of people who weren't necessarily coming from traditional background, from traditional computer science or computer architecture or computer engineering, any of these kind of sort of disciplines, academic disciplines, because I was experimenting with a lot of these kind of projects myself at the time, building a lot of interesting stuff, and I was also working professionally in JavaScript at the time, and I was finding it really interesting to kind of try and do these things in JavaScript, and I was finding that it is actually not only capable, but in sometimes comfortable to attempt these kind of projects in. And I found that when I was sharing the projects that I was doing before I started the channel, when I was sharing the projects I was doing with people, I got kind of two reactions, and one of them was like, wow, I had no idea this was possible, and I'm inspired, I want to do something with that, and that made me really happy and excited. And the other one was just sort of more, this is wrong, you shouldn't do this, it's disgusting, kind of like these kind of like this level, kind of bringing the idea of just doing a project to disgusting and inhumane and kind of like these super negative terms. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. And what I realized is that there are a huge group of people out there who don't want kind of self-taught / web / anything that they deem to be sort of lower than, lower than them. They don't want those kind of people to access the knowledge. That's at least a feeling I'm getting from it. And they're gatekeeping, and I just really hate that kind of stuff. And that's the biggest reason I created this channel, was just that I wanted to say, you know what? We're going to do this stuff. We're going to do it in a really interesting and awesome way. We're going to find all the workarounds, and that's going to be that. And so that's why I started the channel, and I feel like I've gone pretty far with that. I've done as much. I mean, maybe not as much as I could, but I've done a whole lot in that realm of trying to really bring JavaScript and these concepts into kind of weird ways, and like exploring emulators and computer architecture, and building all kinds of sort of data structural and algorithmic kind of things, even building a whole HDL for building FPGA hardware, and in TypeScript, and all of these things were to try and make these concepts, like, to get them to the baseline of just ready to explore. And that's kind of one of the big things that I've been hitting with the channel, is that sometimes I just want to explore a concept for what it is, but I have to build so much kind of infrastructure to get it to that point in JavaScript or TypeScript that I feel like I'm losing the point that I'm actually trying to make just by trying to squeeze it into the hole. And I don't want to say that that's a bad thing, like, I got a lot of enjoyment out of finding ways to make things work in JavaScript. But at this point with the channel, I just there are some things that I just want to explore for their own sake and not have to put it into the box. And I think that there will be value in not trying to, basically not kind of polluting with an additional layer of complexity. Now, I want to be really clear here that I'm not saying that doing that is bad or that you shouldn't do that, because I think it's great when people do this kind of stuff. And I still love it. I absolutely don't want to be put into the box of people that I started the channel to basically rebel against. It's not my intention. So there are some projects that just, they don't, like, they would do better to not have to have a secondary concept wrapped around them, and a secondary concept that can add quite a lot of complexity. Now, additionally to that, there are some things you simply can't do in JavaScript. And, well, I mean, actually, these days I think there's very, very little that you can't do, but there are some things that you simply can't do. At least not without huge amounts of investment of time and skill sets that are actually quite beyond what I'm capable of on my own. So, for example, there was, I remember seeing a talk a while back in person. So actually this was quite a few years ago. I remember seeing an in-person talk by Chris Nova, and it was about kind of how containerization works on like the lowest level, like basically like how Docker containers work, but like just stripping away all the complexity, all the Docker, all that kind of thing, and bringing it to actually just, these are the mechanisms in the operating system that allow this to happen. And I remember being really inspired by that and thinking, I wonder if I can do this on the channel. I wonder if I can find a way to kind of hack around in Node and make this happen. Even by building like Node extensions, native extensions in C++, and exposing something at that level. And the end result is it basically isn't possible in Node, just because of the way that the general Node process works and forking and all of that kind of stuff. It's just kind of a non-starter in that way. At least for me. Maybe someone could make that work with some effort, and if you do make that work, I think it's incredible and you should absolutely tell me about it. But that's kind of one example of that. It's like that is a concept that if I didn't have the constraint of only having JavaScript on the channel, that I could have explored and I could have explained. So these are kind of the reasons that I want to make a bit of a change here after several years of making these kind of videos. So this is what's going to change now. Like, well, one thing is that I'm not going to stop using JavaScript or TypeScript. I'm still going to, like, it's not like that's off the menu now. For me, I still love JavaScript and TypeScript. I basically only write TypeScript now, but I still love it as a language. I still think it's a more approachable scripting language in many ways, or at least it's more capable in some ways than other scripting languages. And I love Python as well. Like I use Python in my job quite often for tooling. But I just would rather write tools in JavaScript a lot of the time. I feel like I can express the ideas better and use the mechanisms of the language better. Maybe that sounds like sacrilege to people. Maybe I've just used the language for so long that is kind of the case for me. But that is how I feel. So I'm not going to stop making JavaScript or TypeScript things. Like, I'm still going to include that as part of the channel, but I just want to make sure that when I make videos about JavaScript and TypeScript, it's because that's adding something. That is the central feature. That is the thing that's interesting. And I have some videos in mind that are actually making good use of the language itself to explore an interesting idea. So it's not going away in that way. What will change is that I'm going to introduce other languages into the mix, and other environments, and kind of just expand the bubble of what is possible to explore here. So I'm happy to bring in something in Python if it's something interesting, especially if we're able to contrast kind of everything we know about like web languages like JavaScript in some way to that. And there are some interesting, deep Python things that I think are interesting to explore. in the language itself and what the language kind of offers in its ecosystem. Additionally, one of the things I'm super excited about finally being able to do in a way is to be able to explore, really low-level computing systems like microcontrollers and system on chips and that kind of thing. That is something I've wanted to do on the channel for a really long time, but simply really, it's possible technically to run JavaScript on a microcontroller, but it's incredibly limited, and it's like the walls you put up for yourself would be kind of, they don't allow you to really explore the environment in that way. And there are some things with that regard, with regard to microcontrollers. Like, I don't really want to explore like Arduino-esque projects, like, setting up this thing and talking to whatever a screen and making that happen. That's interesting, and maybe one day for a particular project. But I'm really interested in looking at the sort of deepest levels of kind of like, this is how the microcontroller is working, and this is like what a bootloader is, and this is how we can sort of jump between spaces, and this is like how interrupt vectors work and they're set up and that kind of stuff. Like really deep stuff that is applicable to all of computing as well, but like the microcontroller offers you this perfect environment to really kind of frame that around. So that is another set of projects that I'm super excited about doing that kind of were almost impossible to do before. And aside from that, of course, the name will change. So the channel from now on is called Low Byte Productions, and that simply reflects, like, in my eyes, the history of the low-level JavaScript. Like, we're keeping everything like of the low level in there, but now we're sort of, it's more about producing interesting things across the board. So it's that's what I'm going for. Maybe not the best name in the world, but naming things is hard. So apart from those things, nothing else will change. So if you join this channel for the spirit of the channel, the fact that we're just exploring things without regard to anyone giving us permission to do it, maybe being wrong occasionally and figuring stuff out, and being able to learn from that. That spirit is what will continue. And I'm really, really excited at this point to make some new videos in that direction. I'm happy to hear your feedback on things. So leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to say goodbye. I understand. I don't think it will change my mind to change it back at this point, but I will understand if you came here only for JavaScript and anything else is kind of off topic. So, kind of with all of that in mind, I want to thank you for watching up until this point. Thank you for generally being a viewer and a subscriber, and I look forward to a lot of interesting content in the future. So, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.